Thanks, Dan. So, in a historical investigation, the scientific evidence we use is archaeology. Now, archaeology, like other scientific evidence, can't prove certain claims. It can't prove that the virgin birth happened or that Jesus rose from the dead. What it can do is it can add credibility to the eyewitness testimony. You see, if all the details that the eyewitnesses gave you that can be checked come out to be true, then you have a good reason to trust their credibility, a good reason to think they've been accurate in other things. But if the things that they tell you that you can check have been shown to be false, then on the flip side, you have a good reason to suspect that they're not reliable. So, how do the Gospels stack up to archaeology? Many people have set out to disprove the Gospels. One such person was the noted archaeologist William Ramsay, and he spent 30 years trying to disprove Luke in both Acts and his Gospel. After the 30 years of his investigation, he wasn't a Christian, he was trying to disprove it. After those 30 years, he was forced to conclude that Luke was a historian of the first rank, and that many archaeological finds support Luke, and none actually showed any error in Luke. Or you can take another expert, Dr. John McRae, who's an expert archaeologist and professor, who says this. He says, archaeology has not produced anything that is a contradiction to the Bible. On the contrary, as we've seen, there have been many opinions of skeptical scholars that have become codified into fact over the years, but that archaeology has shown to be wrong. So, generally when you do an archaeological investigation and you compare it to a historical document, the process is you assume the document is accurate until you have evidence to show that it's not. That's general historical investigation. What Dr. McRae was talking about there is it seems to be a pattern that with the Bible, skeptical people try and say that it's wrong if there's no archaeological support for it. Not that archaeological evidence contradicts it, but there's just no evidence, so the Bible must be wrong. Problem is, every time they do this, they end up with egg on their face because sooner or later something turns up. I'll give you a couple of examples of that. In Luke 3:1, he refers to Lysanias being the tetrarch, which is the kind of ruler, of Abilene in AD 27. And for years, the skeptical scholars pointed to this as evidence that Luke didn't know what he was talking about, because people knew at that point that Lysanias was actually a ruler of Chalcis half a century earlier. Archaeology stepped in, and what actually happened was they found an inscription dated from the time that Luke wrote that happened, which names Lysanias as the tetrarch of Abilene. It turns out there was two people with the same name. Who would have thought? You know, it's like saying John and John. You know, big shock. Skeptics nil, Luke 1. We've got another one. That's Luke's reference to politarchs, which is kind of city officials. He references them in Acts 17, talking about the city of Thessalonica. Once again, people thought that Luke was wrong because there was no evidence of anybody using politarchs in ancient Rome. There was no references to it. Yet later, they found, once again, an inscription on a first century arch which actually said this. It said, "In the time of the politarchs." Continued. Pretty good evidence. It didn't stop there, though, because after that they found 35 more references to politarchs, even from the area that Luke was talking about. It's Luke 2, skeptics nil. So it happens time and time again. You know, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't be betting on the skeptics. I would be betting on the Gospels because they've been shown to be reliable every time you investigate them. And the people that try and say they're not turn out to be wrong. But there are still skeptics out there today who say that there are still problems in Luke. The one that I hear the most is talking about the census. You know, talking about the census, Luke said that it was in the time of Herod the Great when Quirinius was ruling the area, Syria, and that Joseph and Mary had to return to their homeland for the census, to their place of birth. Now, the first thing is skeptics point to the whole idea that government forcing people to return to their place of birth seems pretty dumb. It's absurd, they say. But once again, archaeology has found a reference in AD 104 which says this. It says, "Seeing that the time has come for the house-to-house census, it is necessary to compel," that's force, "all of those who for any cause whatsoever are residing out of their provinces to return to their own homes, that they may both carry out the regular order of the census and may also attend diligently to the cultivation of their allotments." There was another document from AD 48 which also talked about the census being something that the whole family had to do, so everybody had to go back. There we go again. Luke's right, skeptics are wrong. But the second problem there is something that's actually been harped on time and time again. I can remember arguing with people for years about this. It's lots of fun. I love doing that, sorry. So the second claim is the whole idea of the timing of it. You see, from what we know of history from about 100 years ago, Quirinius actually wasn't ruling during the time of Herod, because Herod died in 4 BC, whereas Quirinius didn't begin ruling in Syria until 10 years after that in 86. Obviously, he can't have been doing that if he didn't start. The thing is, an archaeologist found a coin with the inscription of Quirinius on it that actually dated earlier. It actually placed him as a proconsul of Syria from 11 BC till the death of Herod, well within the time frame that Luke said. So once again, you see, Luke was right. And that's all I'm trying to get at, is that archaeology, time and time again, has shown that the gospel accounts are credible. Every detail that we can check has turned out to be true. And so that's what the second verdict is, that the archaeological evidence, the scientific evidence in the case for Christmas, shows that the Gospels are credible. So now Cam's going to come up and he's going to talk about the profile evidence. It's whether Jesus matches the profile of being God. Thanks, Cam.